Out of the box, Emacs is a pretty good editor, but its power and its popularity comes from its extensibility and the ability for you to customize it to your needs. Let's explore some of the changes we can make to Emacs behavior with MetaX Customize. The first thing I'd like to do is get rid of the menu bar and the toolbar at the top of the window so we have a little more space for text on screen. So I'll browse through the groups of options that we can change until I get to Environment. There are so many things to customize in Emacs that it's difficult to put them into a nice hierarchically structured group of options. So at first, you'll probably find yourself just wandering around looking at all the options available to you. But I'm going to jump into Frames, which is a word for windows in the Emacs interface. And Frames is a term that predates a lot of modern GUI terminology since Emacs is about 30 years old now. Looking at what's on screen, you can see that not everything inside of an Emacs buffer is simply text or even a hyperlink. These elements at the top here look suspiciously like buttons and fields inside of a more modern GUI. And in fact, they work almost the same, except that we're going to be moving around and using them with the keyboard. So let's scroll down and look for something regarding the menu. And we have here Menu Bar Mode. If you place the cursor over the arrow to the left of Menu Bar Mode and press Return, some controls are exposed for you here. So let's press Tab now to move to toggle, press Return, and notice that the value is off now. But nothing has changed about the Emacs interface. The menu at the top is still visible, and that's because this here shows that we need to go ahead and modify the state before it takes effect. So I'll press Return on State and get a list of options here. And since I never want to see the menu bar again, I'm going to choose 1, Save for Future Sessions. Now the menu bar has disappeared, and also there's a message in the echo area or mini buffer here that says that Emacs has written a .emacs file into my home directory. So let's take a look at that and see what it has in it. So I'll use Control-X, Control-F for Find File, .emacs. And here on line 6, there's a mention of Menu Bar Mode nil. Notice that the mode of the buffer is Emacs Lisp. And if you've never worked with Lisp before, or you have some fear or hatred towards parentheses, don't worry, you don't have to edit this file yourself. You can still make a lot of customizations to Emacs without editing this directly and just using the customization system. So let's return to that now. I'll kill this buffer and get back to the customization group we were looking at and move on to Toolbar Mode and make the same type of change by toggling it off and saving for future sessions. Now the toolbar has disappeared, and if I were to open the .emacs file again, Emacs has now added another line, Toolbar Mode nil. Notice that Emacs is keeping this up to date intelligently. It's aware of the syntax here, and it even has a warning about editing this manually by hand. You can edit it by hand, but you need to be careful with it. So you can continue like this, looking through this customization group as well as others, making as many changes as you want. And remember that if things get really messed up at any point, you can just get rid of your .emacs file and start from scratch. So perhaps you want to take this time right now to play around with this. Maybe you want to remove the scroll bar, for instance. I'll give you a chance to pause the video and then we'll continue. There's one more change I want to make before going on to changing the font, and that is changing the cursor blink. It's really distracting for me for some reason. So I'll just go down and change blink cursor mode to off. So let's leave this group and the frames group and even the environment group until we're back up to the top level customize buffer, and we'll move on to faces, which is another funny word for font. And if all this alternate vocabulary is making you feel like you're joining a cult, well, no comment on that. We'll move down to basic faces, and the face that we want to change that provides a basis for all of the other faces is the default face. Notice that it's currently set to Deja Vu Sans Mono, which corresponds to the font that we specified on the command line here. We also said we want size 14 or 14-point font, but what we have here is 136, which in 1/10 of a point is pretty close. So if you divide this by 10, you get 13.6. In order to avoid having to set this on the command line for all future sessions, we should save this to the .emacs file. But notice that the .emacs file hasn't been updated. At least it doesn't appear that Deja Vu Sans Mono is anywhere in here. And the reason for that is that the state is standard here. It doesn't realize that there hasn't been any change. Emacs thinks this is the default font, so that there's no reason to add it to the customization group. So you can simply just add a space and delete it. Anything that makes it think that it's been edited, and then save it. And now it should be in the .emacs file. So here at the bottom, this list of properties corresponds to the list we saw in the customize buffer here. Now, setting the font is a good start, but you probably also want to customize the colors inside of Emacs as well. And one way to do that is through what Emacs calls themes. So let's move to the top of this buffer and do a search for theme. As it turns out, none of these options here actually allow you to preview or set any themes. They're settings that control the behavior of themes. So in order to get to the themes list, you can use meta-x customize themes. The list of themes that you see here are the ones that are available by default in version 24 of Emacs. And to set a theme, just move your cursor over the checkbox and press return. To get a better look at what setting the theme does, let's open up the .emacs file and notice the color changes that it's made for the syntax highlighting here. I'm going to switch back to the list of themes with Ctrl+X+B, and I like to have a theme that has a dark background to it. So let's take a look at deeper blue. It mentions a deep blue background. But I'm seeing a white background. Let's see if the Emacs buffer is any different. Well, the colors have changed, but it's a white background. So maybe there's a problem with this theme. Let's try this one here that mentions having a black background. So there seems to be a deeper problem here. And what it is, if you look in the .emacs, actually it's a little bit hard to even see it right now. Let's switch back to the customize faces buffer, customize group basic faces, and take a look at the default face here. So what's happening is that the default face actually sets a foreground and background color that's overriding the theme colors here. The idea is that the theme sets the basic colors and styles for you, but any customizations you've made override individual properties. So let's uncheck foreground and background and save this change. And now we're seeing the black background we were looking for. So let's go back to custom themes. And I'm going to try this theme Wombat at the bottom here. Let's see how that looks with the .emacs. Yeah, this is definitely an improvement now. But we're not quite done yet because the theme won't be saved for the next session unless we go up to the top and press Save Themes Settings. So let's see what that's done to our .emacs file. It's added this line here, Custom Enabled Themes, Wombat. The quote is something we'll get into when we eventually get into Emacs Lisp programming. Now, this list of themes here isn't a very big one, but these are just the themes that are installed by default. Fortunately, there are ways of getting even more themes for Emacs, and we'll look at one of those ways in the next video when we look at installing packages. Until then, I'm going to take this .emacs file and put it into a GitHub repository so that you can follow along. And I'll be tagging changes to this file between episodes with the episode number. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video on packages.